you and your staff last year. Are you guys doing that again this year?
Yeah, definitely. That will be next Monday, Tuesday. We'll do that. Yeah. Not
is that?
I'm sorry. Monday, Tuesday prior to the draft. Is that next Tuesday? Yeah. I don't even know what day it is. Yeah.
How did you feel like that helped you guys last year, and what do you look to gain from doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I think you just try and let the board fall. We give every scout, you know, each team. I make a scout. You're the GM of the Giants, the Raiders, whoever, and we give them, our pro guys go through what each team's needs are, what we see their needs are, and obviously you're not necessarily supposed to draft for a need, but teams still do it. And at that point, you start looking and see where need and skill level fits. So it's nice when you still feel a need. So they go down, and sometimes guys will pick it the way a lot of the mocks have it. Sometimes guys will do it how they have it in their mind. If they're picking a wide receiver or whatever for X team, and so it naturally, if you do it enough times, it naturally will present different scenarios. And sometimes there may be a scenario that you didn't think about. At 9, there's probably going to be less scenarios than what we were dealing with last year at 12, 22 when we started. So, but there'll still be a lot of variations, and the goal is to hopefully you practice a scenario that actually presents itself, which makes it real easy. We'll have some discussion on it, and I'll make whoever the GM of that team, explain why their pick was, if it's something that's way out of the ordinary. And then I'll also put somebody in charge of the Bills, not me. And when they get to that pick, they'll have to explain, what they're thinking, especially if it's something that wasn't obvious on the board.
Hey, Brandon, the so-called experts out there, the mock drafters, have got you guys really in a wide variety of potential picks at 9. Is that good for you, that there is such a variance and no one really quite knows what you're going to do?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Explain why.
I think, I don't want to be sitting here with a major hole. I think if you have a major hole in a spot that's just glaring, that Joe fan, Joe media writer, whoever knows you're really in a need, and if you don't get it in the first round, now you're, especially if it's a position that is considered thin, I think it would be harder to play poker, so to speak, with what your plans are. So yeah, I like it. I know there's a lot of stuff out there. You can't, everybody has a mock, so you don't know what's just people making stuff up and what their intel is, but it's always interesting to see.
Brandon, in that sense, how much further ahead might you be from the perspective of having quarterback addressed a year ago, and what's some of the moves and with all the additions that you made in free agency?
Yeah, it helps. Last year, a lot of the spring for myself and Sean and Brian Dayball and Joe Shane and even Terry and Kim, because the quarterback's such a valuable position and a commodity. A lot of our time and energy was trying to make sure we had that list right, because that was going to have the biggest impact on what we're doing. So to be able to spread out, so to speak, and not send everybody to the same place, and I feel like our coverage is better. I feel like we're able to get more time, more looks on more guys. It's not that we miss guys, it's just a deeper dive on certain players that, there's only so many hours in the day.
And would you consider this draft, Howie Roseman said this, I think, back at maybe the Senior Bowl, that this might be a historic year for defensive line depth. There could be 9, 10. Do you see it the same way? Is this one of these years where that particular position group is just off the charts great?
I think it's solid. I don't know if I want to label it off the charts great. I'd have to really go back and look. And at the end of the day, there's projections and how players are going to be used. Sometimes there's D linemen that some teams running a 3-4 have rated much higher than we have rated running a 4.3 and vice versa. So, you know, there's guys out there that we don't feel as highly about because we run a 4.3 that I could see if Sean was running a 3.4, we probably feel it would be a better fit.
Brandon, in 2017, you traded down in round one. Last year, you guys traded up in round one. In general terms, can you just outline what a GM has to consider when trading up as opposed to moving down? Because I got to imagine there's different things at play there that you're weighing in determining, you know, making a move down.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to consider. Let's first talk about going down. If you're sitting in a position and you got one guy sitting on the board when you're getting close to the clock, and that you really like, and you value that, he fits wherever what round, first round, second round, whatever you're at. If you trade down, you're basically saying you almost better trade down to another round, because if you trade 4 or 5 back, the odds of one guy sticking out there is not very good. Now, if you have 5 to 7 guys, and somebody wants you to move back, 6 to 10, although it's close, you still could, there's a chance all those guys get going. You probably got a good shot to get one of those guys if you have similar grades. So it really goes back to following your board. That's why it's so important. Draft day, if you get your board right, should be a lot simpler. It's just like Sean out there on game day. If they've practiced everything and they've done it and it works well in practice, it probably has a good chance to work on game day. So same thing, trading up. If you have, if you're down at this level in the draft, let's just say you were at 25 and you have a guy in the top tier of your draft board. You think he is in the first round, I divide into 3, top, middle, and bottom. If you have a guy in the top tier and he's by himself up there, and you think he is really an impact, you're talking about a rare player at his position, that might be the time to do it. But you also have to consider, what is the cost? Is there a team willing to do it? And then what is the cost? Is the cost too much to where it's going to really jeopardize the rest of your draft or potentially future drafts?
So is the real challenge then weighing what's left on the board with what's being offered, and which is more important? Because each case, I'm guessing, is going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's just take an example. Let's say it's the 3rd round. Okay, let's say, what pick do we have? We're like pick 74, I think. So if we're in the 3rd round and we're getting close to our pick, and let's say we're 5, 6 away, and we've got a guy rated high in the 2nd round, and he's sticking out like a sore thumb, and we've done our due diligence. Our board is telling us, let's try and go get this guy. We think he's significantly better than the player, if he's gone, than we're going to be choosing from if the rest of our guys are in the 3rd round. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Well, Edmonds happened last year. That was the other thing.
Yes, Tremaine was exactly a guy that we had up there and was a position of need too. I mean, again, I know I say draft best player available, and I truly mean that, but if there's a guy that's best player available and he fits a need, that is also telling you what you should do, with the board. So it's not that we try and ignore needs. We're trying to fill needs, but you can't reach for needs, and that's why I gave that example last time. If we had not picked a quarterback at, let's say, 12 last year, if we'd stayed put, and then said, well, what the heck, we're just going to pick a quarterback at 22, no matter who it is, but if we didn't have any first-round grades on it, then it doesn't make sense.
You also have 10 picks, Brandon, and do you get to a point where you say, look, I mean, the roster is good enough where I don't know if 10 guys can make this roster. Does that, or is a commodity a commodity, and 10 picks are 10 picks? You know what I mean? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to ask those questions, and that's what we do later in the round. And I have found that that's a little harder this year, later in the rounds. You have to ask the questions, and that's part of the vision, that even when the coaches get their chance to present who they like, how does this guy fit? Okay, we got a 6-round grade on him. He's the last position in his roster. Who does he beat out? And if you're telling me he's definitely gonna beat out somebody, you feel, you know, barring health, he's gonna beat out a guy, then I feel better about taking that guy than a guy you go, he's gonna battle with a guy who was on our practice squad last year who really didn't make the team. I don't know which one's better. Then you would rather, maybe if there's a guy up there to trade up to get a guy that you know, this guy's making my roster. At a minimum, he's gonna help us on special teams.
Brandon, with the moves that you made in free agency, how do you feel like you have truly gotten to that point where the idea of best player available isn't something that you just say, but something that you can really go about, implementing?
Yeah, I do think I can sit here and say that we don't, what I was talking about earlier, I don't feel that we have a glaring hole. Now, we're not, like I said, I'm never gonna sit here and say we got some positions that are stronger than others. I don't have to go through those. You guys are pretty sharp people. So we still do have quote unquote needs, but not going into the draft with a glaring hole was the focus and will be the focus every year at free agency. And I think at a minimum, we've at least accomplished that.
Brandon, is your board movement-wise, where is it at this point, about a week and a half away, and how much tinkering will happen between now and Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, like right now, I got the scouts in there, and we're watching 3 players at a position, day 3 players, 4th round and beyond. We're moving around in different positions, but the thing is, what's the order we like these guys? And we're also talking about what's their role in special teams. If you got 3 guys that are all backup players, okay, if one's a really good special teamer, you might have to put him on top for the sense of the 46 of who gets a jersey, even though maybe he's not the best line of scrimmage player. So those are some of the conversations we're having now as far as guys in clumps. We're just kind of moving around the board where maybe we're not all in sync on the order of these players. Maybe we've been arguing a little bit back and forth, and maybe the coaches came in and we heard what they said, and we still haven't come to a consensus.
At what point does the conversation focus in on what to do Thursday?
So what we'll do is the scouts are going to go home at the end of the day Wednesday. So we'll say Monday, 2 days. They'll go home, and the board will, for the most part, be set. But I'll still watch some guys. I want to, there's still a few guys that I want to make sure I'm comfortable with where they're at. So it's our board, but I reserve the right to move a guy here or there if I don't, if I feel we beat him up too much, or if I don't feel we've given him enough love. We also have I'll meet with our doctors this week, and they'll have some opinions on players medically, how they see him. This guy, may already have a lot of wear and tear. Sometimes that affects. So I still have to go through that portion of it. But I would say by the weekend, it'll be in good shape, and we'll do the mocks next week, next Monday, Tuesday, and we'll shut it down after that.
Right, I know it's April 15th, and
I get you.
the regular.
No,
go ahead.
And the regular season schedule hasn't even been set. But what do you make that, based on what you did in free agency and even before the draft, this team has the expectations have risen to a point where maybe you should be considered a 9-win team even before the whole thing kicks off?
It's honestly, I don't even know what the prognosticators say.
I'll be one.
That's real.
You're a 9-win team.
We're 9 wins.
Minimum.
Does that get us in the playoffs?
I don't know, does it?
It did 2 years ago. So if it gets us in the playoffs, we'll take it. Listen, I think you guys know Sean McDermott and the coaches and the type of players we're putting out here. I think you're gonna, everybody's gonna get a hard-nosed effort, and I feel we're improving. We're heading in the right direction, but we've said it many times. We still have to build this team. There's a lot of new players on here. There's still a lot of gelling that has to go, and we got to get through training camp and health. And there's, it's April the 15th. Everybody got their taxes done? It's April 15th. We still got 5 months almost until we play, a lot will change in this league between now and 5 months, considering the draft is next week.
Tight end is arguably less of a early impact position than some others. Just what do you view are some of the challenges of projecting guys, whether a guy's going to put it all together at tight end?
Well, tight end is a kind of a two-part player. What does he bring as a run blocker? Almost three. What does he do as a pass blocker? And then what does he do in the passing game? And so as we're going through these tight ends, those are the three areas we focus on. Let's watch his receiving skills, simply as a receiver. Let's grade him there. And then what does he do as an inline blocker? What does he do when he's not attached? And then what does he do? Do they keep him in the passing game at all, or is he always going out for a route? And there is projection because there's so few. The game has changed. So many of them are flexed out in the college game, and we're even seeing it into our game. So it's definitely projection, but you do see certain players being used more, and then we did privates with certain guys, and we went to pro days with certain guys at a lot of positions, and that one as well. So you try and get around them, and if it's not something you've seen on tape that you think the guy can do, then you want to try and get one of your coaches out there to work with them and get them out on the grass. It's not pads, but at least see where their fundamentals are, and if they don't have them, can they be coached? And sometimes they'll teach them some things and see how quickly they're kind of picking it up.
Hey Brandon, given the age you have in your running back group, I mean, do you need a running back somewhere in this draft?
I understand the question, but I don't want to sit here and say we need it. I get it. We got two guys that are over 30, so we pay attention to it. But I still think there's guys out there. There's even some in free agency still, believe it or not, that I think can help, and we'll get on teams and help them. So it's kind of a different market for that position altogether in a lot of ways. But there are some guys in the draft that I think do have a good skill set, and we'll see how it falls.
Brandon, how much of an effort do you put into intangibles like a college graduate versus someone leaving college early when it comes to the draft?
I don't necessarily weigh against. We talked about this a little bit at the Senior Bowl, how I know we've ended up with some guys, but I think you're definitely getting a more mature player when he's been there all 4 years, because most of the time, unless they've been injured, most of the time they're playing 4 years because they weren't a coveted player. They weren't seen as this 5-star, 4-star, whatever, elite athlete, and they haven't necessarily had their tails kissed all their lives. You see people that have had to work to get this opportunity, and they're very thankful. Not that the underclassmen are not, but I do think the maturity level of a true senior 4-year or even a redshirt guy is naturally going to be a little higher than a 3-year player. But there's some of these underclassmen that we've met that are some really fine young men and mature beyond their years. And look at Tremaine last year. I mean, look how young. I think you guys saw a guy who, despite being 19 when we drafted him, is very mature. So I don't think as a whole they are, but I do think there are some that definitely are.
Brandon, we haven't spoke to you since you signed Eli Harold. I noticed he's listed as a defensive end when the team put it out there. I know he's been kind of a tweener. Is that where you see him starting off?
Yeah. We see him as a 4-3 end for us. So he did some of that in college, and he was a guy coming out depending on what defense you were running, whether you were going to stand him up or put his hand in the dirt. But no, we're going to try him as a 4-3 end, and I've seen him do it before, so I know he can do it.
Given how many offensive linemen you signed this offseason, is it less likely you need to get one, or is it less likely you take one in the first round this year?
I wouldn't say it's less likely. No, I mean, I think there's some good ones. And guys, I'm serious. We're taking the best player. We got the board stacked. I mean, we could draft right now, and there's some good players, and I feel confident that we'll get a good player at 9. And I'll be curious how these mocks go, but I can see a lot of scenarios of either side of the ball.
Brandon, going back to your mock draft last year, how many did you get right?
The think we were 0 for 0. Well, we got Josh, but there was no scenario where we got Josh and Tremaine. I told you I screwed that up last year because I do dictate the mock. Sometimes I'll say, all right, you can't take this player, or these 3 players have to be gone before we pick, something like that, just to mix it up so that we don't get the same thing going. But last year I screwed that up, and we did all sorts of trade ups and trade backs with the first one, but I never did it with pick 22. We always made a pick at 22, or in scenarios we used that pick to move up so we didn't have it.
When you look at now that all the pro days are done, and all the guys, especially receiver, cornerback, who ran fast under 4.5, is it harder to evaluate playing speed these days because everybody tests so well, or is the game just faster?
The game is faster, for sure, but the film doesn't lie, and you can tell play speed. And it's funny, it's a checks and balances. So if you see a guy, let's say a cornerback, if he's running high 4.5s, 4.58, 4.6, you're questioning, okay, is he really? But if you watch the film and you see him running with guys who tested at 4.4, 4.45, and they're not blowing by him, he's got the play speed, he's got the instincts, he's aware, he knows maybe where he's deficient, and there are guys in this draft that, like every year, and then you got guys that, I know there's a position on top of my head right now that we were talking about this morning, where one guy ran 0.2 higher than the other one, and I would swear the other guy was fast. The guy that ran the higher 0.2 is faster than the other one. So some guys really test well, and it's easy to get enamored with testing numbers, but that's why we try and really put a lot of precedent in getting our board in really good shape before we go to Indy, before these numbers start flashing out there, because it is natural. You see that card that says 4.32, and you're like, man, I really want that speed, but maybe it doesn't translate on the field, or maybe mentally it doesn't translate to.
Brandon, how
Let's
many,
take 2 more
how many
questions.
players would you say end up on your final board, roughly, year to year?
Usually probably as low as 115, probably as high as 140, somewhere in there. It depends on how nice the doctors are to us medically. That usually, are guys that have been in trouble. But I got a good feel for any of the guys that we would have trouble concerns. It's really the medical rechecks were just last week, so I've already saw the doc in the cafeteria a while ago. I told him don't bring his red pen. Be easy on us.
How many do you scout? Like, how many do you have eyes on that you pare it down to?
Well, when we start with the board in December, that board is high 300s to pushing 400. But there's also some guys on there that we are hearing smoke about as underclassmen. So, it's not like you can wait till they can declare and decide to go watch them live. So I would rather err on at least getting one live look on an underclassman in case he does declare. And there were some guys here this year that we really didn't feel should have declared, but they did, like every year for whatever reason. So, then you have that, and then you pare it down in February once the guys have been declared, plus we start eliminating guys pre-Indy for various reasons.
Hey Brandon, your linebacker position, Lorenzo's in his last year, and it looks like that's an area that you're going to have to address at some point. In the second, third, fourth round of this draft, do you see some depth in the linebacker position, both maybe inside, outside, but is there any quality depth in that range? I don't think you're thinking first round, but I mean in that range.
Listen, there's
Again, best player available, I get it, but.
I know you don't believe me. I'm going to prove to you guys wrong.
But what do you see in that range, maybe?
I do think there's guys. And again, I mentioned special teams. If it's not a guy that's going to come in and win a starting job, I am going to want to know what he's done on teams. And if he hasn't done teams, it's just because he's been a starter, he's been really good at that school for so many years, and they don't want to put him out there, that he's been willing to do it, and he plays, like he's got his hair on fire running downfield. You know what I'm saying? If he plays that, you guys know what special teams guys are. They're physical, they're running fast. You know, those are one of the things where you will pay a little bit more attention to the 40 time. What's he rolling down that field at, 40, 50 yards? Because a lot of guys getting timed. How many plays do they really run, 40 yards? But I think those measurements do show up more in special teams. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but we'd be looking for a line of scrimmage player, but also somebody who we felt could impact us on teams.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.